Welcome to the LeaderImpact podcast. We are a community of leaders with a network in over 350 cities around the world dedicated to optimizing our personal, professional, and spiritual lives to have impact. This show is where we have a chance to listen and engage with leaders who are living this out. We love talking with leaders, so if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions to make the show even better, please let us know. The best way to stay connected in Canada is through our newsletter at leaderimpact.ca or on social at LeaderImpact. If you're listening from outside of Canada, check out our website at leaderimpact.com. I'm your host, Lisa Peters, and our guest today is Ryan Smith. Ryan is founder of Unearth Coaching based in Peterborough, Ontario in Canada. He specializes in refining leadership and interpersonal skills to tackle common organizational challenges such as miscommunication, unproductive conflict, leadership gaps, employee disengagement, and siloed teams and departments. Ryan holds a Bachelor of Business degree from Trent University with certification as an everything disc trainer. Born and raised in Peterborough, Ryan is passionate about his hometown where he currently resides with his wife. When he's not coaching, you can find him indulging in his love of basketball, strumming his guitar, and maintaining his impeccable beard. Welcome to the show, Ryan, and that is an impeccable beard.
Thank you, Lisa. It's good to be a part, and for anyone who's listening, they might not be able to see. You have to catch the video on that, but make sure that it would be good. So I probably put more work into that than even.
I appreciate it. Your bio, and if anyone's looking, I don't know if we can tell how tall we are, but it says you have a love of basketball.
Mm-hmm.
We have I have a love of basketball as well.
Mm-hmm.
So did you go on to play anywhere else? Like past high school?
Yeah. I went on to play some college basketball for a couple of years. So
Nice.
I enjoyed that a lot. And eventually I switched universities because I was doing a change of degree. And the new school I went to did not have a team, unfortunately. Oh. But
are you playing men's now?
Yeah, I always try to stay active, right?
Good for you. All right. Well, we want our listeners to learn more about you. You've got a great resume, intro. So I'm excited to learn more about your professional story and how you got to where you are today. And really, we're looking for those pivotal moments that moved you along your journey. So jump in.
Yeah, totally. So I'm a business grad by background, and it's funny going through. Didn't really know what I wanted to do with it. I had just gotten some advice from people close to me of, hey, business is a good area to get involved in, can provide you with some good opportunities moving forward. And so I finished my degree and was kind of bouncing around from job to job, just trying to find what would be that next significant career move, if you will. And I had moved out of my hometown, spent some time in Toronto, came back home. And then a good friend and mentor of mine, he approached me wanting me to work for him. He had actually started up his own company in the industry. And so he brought me in just as kind of like a marketing admin background role to support him in that. I actually didn't even know what coaching was as a field. Like, coming from sports background, the moment someone said that, I said, you mean like athletics or something like that? And little did I know that had been a term in business circles that had been popular for quite a while. And so he kind of introduced me to what leadership coaching was. And so I was working with him for a few years. And then over time, he saw that I was really good at certain parts of the job, specifically the public speaking side of it. So I started taking over workshops and leading those. And I really kind of fell in love with the industry. I loved the opportunity to go deep with people. I loved not just in terms of performance and helping organizations, but especially relationships. And there was something about creating a workplace that people love to be a part of, where so many people, they might come home from work and just feel exhausted or feel like they're constantly having to deal with difficult people all day. And there was something very rewarding about, helping people find their passion again, so to speak, and actually getting to come to work, thinking of it that way rather than I have to come to work. So I approached him and said, hey, I'd really love to learn the one-on-one coaching side of the job. So he started mentoring me up in that. And I started getting some more certification, learning and growing my skill sets. And then I'd say a big pivotal moment, of course, was the pandemic. that happened with that. And so much of what we did was in-person workshops. And so overnight, probably around 70% of our revenue just got wiped off the books when the lockdowns happened. And of course, I didn't want to let my mind go there, but I could kind of see it written on the wall that eventually he had to really kind of scale back the company. And that meant letting me and all the other employees go, where he would just kind of focus really, he was getting close to retirement anyways. So he was just focusing on the armchair kind of work, if you will. And so that was a very kind of scary time for me because it felt like the company had been doing well. I'd been doing well in the role. Didn't really know where to go at that point. And then after that happened, another HR company who we'd done a lot of work with, they had referred clients to us. The owner reached out to me and he said, "Hey, Ryan, I'd love to bring on your service that you offer. I'm not looking at having employees though. So do you want to work with me as an independent contractor?" And that was kind of a scary step because I was, kind of new out of school, very used to the stability of a salaried position and wasn't sure I wanted to go that route. But I had some good people in my corner encouraging me that this could be a great opportunity. So went off, worked with him for a couple of years, did very well, continued to grow. And then, there was a moment where it would have been a little over a year now, that I received a text from the owner of this HR company out of nowhere telling me that he was going to have to close down the company. And there's some details I can't get into why that happened, but it was not planned on his end. And that once again left me in this similar predicament that I was in years before that, of, okay, where's the next step? What am I doing with this? And it was kind of a having to move quickly because we had clients that were, expecting a certain level of service. We didn't want to have disruptions towards that. And they were really kind of left out, with their hands out to dry. Like, what are we going to do? Who's going to fill this gap for us? And so I decided to pull the trigger and start my own company, and had to move very quickly on that because, like I said, we had a certain, we had some bigger corporate clients. We had clients that, we already had work on the books for them. And so I all of a sudden had to scramble and get this together. But it was so great. Some of the clients we had were super supportive and encouraging to me. And it's now marked 1 year in October since I started the company. So,
our last podcast we did with Olga, and we talked a lot about resilience and just when something happens to you, and you talk about you had to move quickly, because you can revel or you can sit in the badness,
Yes.
But it's making those decisions. Do you ever think that when you reflect back on your life and you think as a basketball player, so number one, you're a basketball player. You didn't learn to play basketball alone. You had a coach. So I loved how you thought, oh, coaching, is that like athletics?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a huge advocate for as we grow, you still need a coach, for certain things in your life. How do you attribute team sports to, being coached to where you are today?
Yeah, it's often because I have such a love of sports and kind of experience with it growing up, I often think of different metaphors in terms of sports analogies. And so, for example, one thing when I'm talking with leadership with my clients is I'll make the big distinction between, high performers or individual contributors and leaders. Then I look at the star player versus the coach. And so, anyone who's a fan of sports will know that the best players rarely make good coaches or executives. And often it's players who sat on the bench or were fairly obscure. All of a sudden they get to this realm of coaching or an executive position and they do really, really well. And so I make that distinction that, hey, it's not about how much you contribute individually, but it's about how well you can leverage people and pull kind of the gold out of them, right? And put them in a place to succeed. And it was funny because yes, I didn't understand what the industry was, but in a way I did, because growing up, I was always someone who, whatever I could learn, I would just go straight to the person who did it well. And I would have no reservations about asking them. Maybe sometimes I should have, because I was maybe too forward sometimes with people. But because I was the person who was often willing to ask where a lot of others weren't, I learned that often these successful people, they want to give away their expertise, their knowledge. They're just looking for someone willing to listen. And so I was able to kind of build relationships with, successful people, learn from them. I was just hungry all the time. So I learned, oh, this is what I've always been doing, so to speak. This is what I've always been passionate about. It's just now there's a framework for it in a business context. And I think it's super important, because a lot of times people think it's what knowledge or skills can they give me, which is good. But there's something about having simply an outside perspective that keeps you grounded. Someone who's built that relationship with you, they know what your blind spots are and what ditches you tend to fall in, so to speak, so they can guide you away from those. And I think that's just invaluable when it comes to growing, because we all have those different blind spots, those different habits that we have, or and it's hard to pull ourselves out from that. So it for me, having a number of different mentors who I really trust and built that relationship with, who can hold me accountable, who can provide that outside perspective, and then also just the accountability side, just make sure that I'm following through on things that I've said are important to me.
Yeah. What advice? So, I mean, you're obviously that type of personality, right? You reached out, you got a question, you go to the person that probably has the answers, bull in a china shop, whatever, you did it. What advice would you give? And I'm sure you coach people. It's like, I don't know anybody. I don't know where to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they do. They just haven't opened it. I'll step back and let you answer, but
Yeah. That's a great question, because sometimes people, they're like, I really want a mentor. I don't know where to look. And the first obvious thing is just look at the circles you're in right now. Are you, part of a church, a sports team, a club, your school, work? Think about the immediate spheres where you're doing life. And if you find you don't have too many of those circles, then it's simply get out and try to get involved in groups. And that's where some self-reflection can come in the sense of, what am I good at? What am I passionate about? What is energizing for me? Things that just maybe other people might feel like their work, but they don't feel like work to me. And how can I find other people moving in those lanes? What are my values? Those are all really important. So that's where self-awareness, self-reflection is also really important. After you've done that initial scan of kind of your immediate environment. And another way as well that I think of in finding those people, if maybe you are involved and plugged in and no one stands out to you, is what I would think of is there anyone who you really admire, who you look at the values they exude or the way they carry themselves, and you're like, I really want that, or I like that? Or is there anyone that when you spend time with them, you just almost feel something rub off on you, positive, so to speak? You either walk away feeling more relaxed, you walk away feeling inspired, you feel some kind of energy that you were able to draw off of. I have various mentors like that. There's one in particular right now that he just has this way about him that every time we spend time together, I walk away feeling relaxed, feeling like everything's going to be okay. Like the journey of an entrepreneur can be very stressful at times. And somehow, like, I'll bring him these problems. I'm like, what am I going to do about this? I don't have the answers. I don't know what to do about this. And he just has this way about him that I always walk away feeling like I can do this. It's not, the sky is not falling. It's not going to be as big a problem. Or, I had another mentor who was just so creative. and such a big thinker. And every time I walked away, I'm like, I'm thinking way too small on things. Like, how can I stretch myself? So those kinds of people, that's what I would start to think about in the people you want to reach out to. And from there, it's just building relationship to the point where you can make that ask.
Good advice.
Yeah.
Who are your people? Start there.
Mm-hmm.
We'll move on to our second question. We usually talk about the best principle of success, if you have one, and if you have a story that can illustrate that.
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a few that would jump to mind for me that are all great, but I think if I was to pick one of the best, I would, and it might sound a little cliche, but I'd say that you really have to define success for yourself. So a great example of that with one of my mentors is I met with him recently, and he was encouraging me to think about where you want the business to go. What do you foresee? Have you thought about that, Ryan? And so funny, and it's not even me, but my mind instantly went to a transactional place of like, oh yeah, I'd love to be making this much money. And he said, no, Ryan, I don't worry about that. He's like, but what do you want the business to do for you? How do you want it to function in your life? What kind of quality of life would you like to be living? And it got me thinking about all those things, because he said, finances are great, but that's just a vehicle to something. Like, what are you hoping to do with that? And that's the real answer that you're after. And it's funny because no matter how much I've known some of these things, but when we don't define success clearly for ourselves, something else will come in and fill that. And usually it's a fear or a comparison type of thing that will take room. Is like, what is everyone else doing? That's what I should be doing. Or what am I afraid of losing? And if you haven't clearly defined what success looks like for yourself, you'll fall into those little traps, and you won't take ownership of your life, because it will always feel like you're following something else.
Yeah. Have you ever Have you ever fallen into fear or afraid of losing?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's times where in my professional journey where I can see different behaviors that I've engaged in, where that was really kind of a poverty mindset, or that was me trying to protect something rather than thinking about what am I trying to achieve? Where am I trying to advance in my life? Like I said, I think it's a trap we all can fall into. And that's even another area where having a coach or having mentors in your life is helpful, because it helps you step out of that first person perspective and look at the situation more objectively. Good.
All right. I'm thinking you have some good, moving along into failures and mistakes, because I think we all have some, and you're sounding like you're willing to share. I think we all know we learn more from our failures and our mistakes than our successes. So if you're willing to share one of them and maybe what you learned from it.
Yeah. And actually, based on what we were just talking about, this leads perfectly into sometimes where you let fear or that kind of drive your decisions. There was one client in particular where we were planning to do a workshop together, and they were very picky about the details, very very particular about what they wanted. And I was kind of outlining what this product is about, what this service is about, and here's what you can expect. And they had a lot of things they wanted included, and not that I won't ever customize things, but as we kept going back and forth and, okay, well, I'll change this, I'll change that, something in my gut felt like this was off, like that this wasn't me. And I didn't realize that I had compromised it so much in order to accommodate what this client wanted, that it was no longer the product I had designed. It was no longer even a product that I was best equipped to deliver. And it did not go very well. And it did damage the relationship with that client. Yeah. There was a lot of difficult talks we had to have after that. And there were some things on both sides that were going on there, but really I think the fear of what if I need to make this sale, or they'll be upset if I tell them no off the beginning, that I can't do that. And I ended up making all these compromises that I look back, and it made me realize the importance of staying true to those values and yourself, and that will resonate with the right people.
Mm-hmm. I have a similar situation, and mine was when it was all done, the event actually went incredibly well, but it was not something I wanted to be involved. It was not my values, but it went really well. So everyone saw. And when I had to report on it to someone who actually saw the numbers and saw the budget and went, what happened here? I was humiliated. And I was humiliated because this was not how I wanted to run my business. And I was reporting to someone who cared about me and said, you need to, this is fine. The event was good. And here's some suggestions for you. I was very thankful, but humiliated to begin with, because the gut feeling, I let it go. I let it happen. The event went off. But when something so good happens from the event, you go, it's okay,
Yeah.
But it's not. It's because all I thought was, do I want another client like this one? Like, right? You're going to build your business on. So I thank you for sharing that, because it just makes me, I look at them as learning experiences, right? Like, that's what we learn from our failures and mistakes. So Thank you for sharing. So in Leader Impact, we want to grow personally, professionally, and spiritually, and I'm to increase impact. So I'm wondering if you have a story that you can share of how the spiritual makes a practical difference in your life as a leader. And I understand that you are actually a lead pastor or associate pastor.
Yes.
Okay, so it's a good story.
And it's funny though, because it's that definitely, of course, has a lot of spiritual involvement in it. It's easy to confuse the two with, the work of doing ministry, so to speak, and your actual spiritual journey and your spiritual walk that you do every day. And so it can really, I think pastors sometimes need to be particularly careful, because it's like you're around that environment so much that you can sometimes mistake that. And then all of a sudden you start experiencing challenges in your own life that you realize, like maybe I've gotten away from my personal, that connection that I have with God and with my own walk. And so when it comes to, as a leader, like personally and professionally, I think one of the most important things is it keeps me grounded, especially in realizing there are things I can't control. So, one time I heard it put a really good way of living from your stances rather than your circumstances. And even that relates to the defining success for yourself, right? But typically, I have an interesting perspective on this, especially in my business. Typically, leaders and high-performing people, society, we reward them for being impatient, harsh, insensitive, and we call that being a strong leader, or look at how confident they are, and there's almost an expectation that those kinds of behaviors are going to be there. But what's interesting is I talk to these kinds of leaders every day. That's the cool thing, is I get to spend all my day around high-performing people and very successful people. And you see that there's actually a lot of fears and insecurities there, and anxieties. And a lot of it is this need to be in control that drives them to sometimes lack empathy with their people, because they're just trying to drive a result and push for a certain outcome or goal. That causes them to micromanage, because they just can't rest until they for sure know that it's all been done the way they want. And it's hard to find that balance, because even when I'm working with leaders and trying to help them that way, but I think my faith helps me speak to them in a way I don't always get to explicitly put it out that way. There are some clients that I get to share my faith and beliefs in that way, but I know it's coming through anyways in the work that I do with them and my perspective, and that they're hearing a perspective that's very rare for the workplace.
Yeah.
It's so different in a church where I can completely and openly talk about it that way. But nonetheless, I know that they're receiving of that in some way, directly or indirectly, when I'm working with businesses on it. And so for me, it reminds me, and even personally in my own business, because I have to put myself in their shoes about the fears of like, what's going to happen with payroll next month, and all that stuff that comes with running a business, and realizing that all I can do is come to work each day, do my best, kind of partner with God and pray that he'd give me the strength, the wisdom to make good decisions for the business, and then trust that the seed is planted, and all I can do, right, is water it. But I really can't directly control when it's going to grow, how much it's going to grow. And so there is a peace in that, but it helps you stay really present and not get too focused on, what's going to happen tomorrow. And so I think that's one of the most important things in grounding me personally, and also the way I get to share a message, so to speak, that typically isn't present in many workspaces.
Mm-hmm. I find listening to you interesting when you talk about planting seeds. As a coach, you said sometimes you can, your faith will come out. And I think for some clients, it doesn't. And I appreciate that. I had a client I had a coach once say to me, if you believe in that stuff. And I'm like, okay, we're good. We're done. Like, and I haven't seen her since. My coaches have faith. They are followers of Jesus. And I go out for that. When I went to your website, I had to ask you, I knew by the language you were using that you were a Christian, and I came right out and asked you, and then you come up with, I'm an associate pastor. And so I always think of the language and, offending people. As a coach, I'm not sure, are you careful? Is that on your mind? Or do you just slowly drip? Or is there,
Yeah. And it is on my mind, especially because they're trusting me with a lot. And so not only, and you've probably experienced things like this where, you may be working with a client and they're expecting certain things like, especially with me, we're going to talk about, my employees' performance and my leadership habits and all that stuff. But then it divulges into personal stuff or into more vulnerable things. And so I've had clients share very vulnerable things about their personal lives with me. And I also know what's moving in the background in that, right? In the space that helps with that. But they've trusted me a lot. And so at that point, it's me, really having to listen to Holy Spirit and what I sense, and be like, is now a good time to share this. And trying to be strategic about it. And my experience has not even necessarily been that people get offended per se about it, but there might be certain assumptions they have. And so I want them, I want to build that trust, and I want them to know that I understand and that I'm not looking at them in any particular way. Because it's so funny. I heard this one time, human beings, we're so worried about what other people think of us. And most of the time they're thinking about what we think about them. And so, it's, but, I am very open about, most clients, they know my faith journey. They may not actually know I'm an associate pastor, but they know, my church, they know, my involvement with it. And from there, those are kind of ways that I plant the seed. And I know that they're going to sense something's different when we have those times together.
Yeah.
And so then I've had clients just ask me, right, after that, after a while, when we've built that trust. But it's, even talking to them about their business issues is sometimes takes a few sessions to build up that much where I can confront them on things. So I think if we were all honest, there's always a little bit of fear over that, don't want to offend people. And there's always a bit of a wrestling we do, right? Of, is now the right time? Is it not? And that's where we all kind of learn, right? Because even on that end, I've also had, maybe I wouldn't call it necessarily a failure, but I've had times where I've shared and it wasn't the right moment. And it did affect my level of influence into the person, into what I could speak into their life moving on. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe it was the right time. We don't see it. You don't see the big picture, right? Like we're in the moment of, ooh, that wasn't the right time. But actually, it could have been. I'm not, and the rewards will be seen later.
Yeah.
All right.
Exactly.
Ryan, we've almost come to the end. I just want to thank you for spending this time. So I got one more question for you, is what brings you the greatest joy?
Greatest joy. So I actually am a pretty introverted person. And so for me, there is nothing more amazing than a good cup of coffee, alone in my living room with a good book on a Saturday afternoon. I absolutely love that. I also love movie night with my wife. She's more of an extrovert than I am, but we both really do enjoy those moments, and we will be very intentional with getting a bunch of snacks, that sort of thing. And then I also just love very deep conversations. I love to geek out on different things. I love when me and a friend can just really dive into a certain topic that we love, whether it be sports, whether it be a TV show that we've been watching, whether it be theology and things about our faith. So for me, those are some of my best moments that I really love.
Well, next time you're in my town, we'll invite you over for coffee. You can strum guitars with my husband. We will, and you can guys talk about your beards.
And do all of it.
We'll
mix
do
it all
of
in one event. That's
just
perfect.
A whole lot of joy going on, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to thank you just for spending the last half hour with us. It was a pleasure to meet you, and I love when people put us on to great people doing great things in our country. And to meet you was just a pleasure. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
So if anyone wants to find you, maybe engage with you, later, what is the best way to find you?
Yeah, so I am on LinkedIn, Ryan Smith. And also, if you want to visit my website, unearth-coaching.ca.
All right. Well, I was going to say Ryan Smith is a very common name. I'm not sure how many on LinkedIn. So Ryan Smith Unearthed. Yes.
If Ryan Smith and then you find Unearth Coaching, that'll be it. So
awesome. Well, thank you again, Ryan.
Thank you.
All right. Well, if you're part of Leader Impact, you can always discuss or share this podcast with your group. And if you are not yet part of Leader Impact and would like to find out more and grow your leadership, find our podcast page on our website at leaderimpact.ca and check out our free leadership assessment. You'll also find on our webpage Chapter 1 of Braden Douglas's book, Becoming a Leader of Impact. You can also check out groups available in Canada at leaderimpact.ca, or if you're listening from anywhere else in the world, check out leaderimpact.com or get in touch with us by email, info@leaderimpact.ca, and we will connect you. And if you like this podcast, please leave us a comment, give us a rating or review. This will help other global leaders find our podcast. Thank you for engaging with us, and remember, impact starts with you.